Good afternoon and welcome to a first in the 60-year history of the Cockefair Chair at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. This is our first virtual program. On behalf of the Cockefair Advisory Committee, I want to welcome each of you to this afternoon's program presented by Sarah Marty on Hamilton the Musical. We have received over 340 reservations for this online presentation, and we want to thank you for this terrific response. My name is Pam Hosel, and I'm currently serving as the chair of the Cockefair Advisory Committee. Contact was made by Ann Miller, who leads the Cockefair Speakers Committee, last February, inviting Sarah Marty to speak in Kansas City at our August luncheon in Pearson. And of course, that event had to be canceled. So we decided to go virtual. And Sarah asked Sarah to change her plans and do a virtual program with us. I want you to know she has gone beyond expectation to make today's program exceptional for you. So what can you expect from Cockefair for the rest of 2020? Our continuing education classes will be presented online for the fall semester. The schedule and registration information will be available on the Cockefair website in early September. I think you will be pleased with the courses that are coming up. We are also in the planning stages for a November presentation. The usual postcards and email notifications for this virtual program will go out later in the fall. And we'll continue to use KCUR-FM to get the word out about Cockefair as well. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. William Everett, who will introduce Sarah Marty. Dr. Everett is the Curator's Distinguished Professor of Musicology here at UMKC. Recently, he taught courses on Stephen Sondheim and a course on Jean Tessori as part of Cockefair's continuing education program. Many of you will also know him through the pre-concert programs he leads for various musical performances here in Kansas City. We're deeply grateful to Dr. Everett for his part in this virtual program this afternoon. And so, Dr. Everett, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Pam, for that wonderful and very kind introduction. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm delighted to tell you a bit about this afternoon's presenter, Sarah Marty. Sarah Marty's interest in Hamilton and American musical weaves together several threads from her multifaceted life. First, as the producing artistic director of Four Seasons Theater, she has 15 years of experience producing musicals on stage and supporting outreach programs in libraries and senior centers across Dane County, Wisconsin, which includes Madison. Because of her work as a producer, she has firsthand practical knowledge of what it takes behind the scenes to make theater happen. Second, as program director for the Madison Early Music Festival, her responsibilities include budget administration and marketing. She knows how to get word out about events. Her training in music education also inspires her to find new ways to connect audiences with music from earlier times. Third, as co-director of Holding History at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, she leads an innovative program that introduces the history of media and book arts to intergenerational audiences. Holding History sponsors a wide array of interactive experiences, from hands-on paper-making workshops to events in rare book libraries where students invite audience members to actually turn the pages of centuries-old books. And yes, the paper does feel different. Fourth, Sarah has located and presented on actual historical documents concerning Alexander Hamilton and his times that are housed in several archival libraries at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. This is a marvelous way to use local resources. Among the materials she's discussed are the Reynolds pamphlets, Revolutionary War maps, the first newspaper printings of the Declaration of Independence, and property holdings records from Southern colonies, property meaning not only land, but also enslaved people. Fifth, and finally, as co-interim director of the Boltz Center for Arts Administration, she teaches the business of the arts, what it takes to make the arts happen in a sustainable, mission-driven way. The business side of Hamilton provides a fascinating study in this regard, how it took existing models and ways of doing things and greatly expanded them, from merchandising and marketing to touring and partnering with PBS, and just last month with Disney+. Sarah teaches classes on Hamilton at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and as a matter of fact, is finishing up one such course this week. So she spends a lot of time with this musical, and we're looking forward to hearing her insights this afternoon. But two quick items before we get started. First, following the presentation, we'll have about 15 minutes for question and answer. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to type in questions for Sarah. You can do this throughout the presentation. We'll get to as many questions as we can, time permitting. And please include your name and where you're from, along with your question. And second, if you've not already done so, please be sure your audio is on mute for the duration of the presentation to avoid any unexpected background noises. Thanks so much. And now, here is Sarah Marty on Hamilton and the genius of Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Thank you for joining us today for our conversation about Hamilton and the genius of Lin-Manuel Miranda. When I received the eloquent invitation from Ann Miller on behalf of the board and President Pam Holzel, I immediately started researching the foundation's namesake, Carolyn Benton Cockefair. I learned about her legacy as a gifted teacher who influenced generations of lifelong learners, and how former students were inspired to establish funds to support continuing education, the College of Liberal Arts, and more at University of Missouri, Kansas City, and in the greater Kansas City community. What an honor to be part of her story. Her fans emphasize her ability to ignite heated discussions on broad philosophical questions and to breathe life into great literature by relating it to contemporary problems. She did not care so much about much specific information her students acquired, but whether or not they were inspired when they left her classroom to go out and do the things that educated people do. Participate in cultural activities, read good books, and challenge conventional beliefs. That statement was from the foundation website. As I was reading that description, I was struck by how much Lin-Manuel Miranda, the subject of today's talk, resembled those remarks, and smiled as I imagined a lively conversation between Miranda and kindred spirit, Carolyn Benton Cockefair. In the next few minutes together, we'll focus on the groundbreaking Broadway and cultural phenomenon, Hamilton, an American musical, and its genius creator, MacArthur Fellow Lin-Manuel Miranda. Fusing classical musical theater and poetry with popular music and hip hop, Hamilton exemplifies the highest excellence in the genre and is changing the very nature of the art form, what stories are being told, and who is telling them. In a 2016 article for The Guardian, Public Humanities Literature and Fellow, Sarah Churchill wrote, "Hamilton's the kind of transformative theatrical experience that has only happened a few times in the history of American musicals. It joins the likes of Showboat, Oklahoma, and West Side Story as game changers, innovative productions that forever redefined what came after them. It's a bold claim, to be sure, and one that is proven to be true on a multitude of levels. The show is a masterpiece of musical theater and the 14+ art forms that it includes: music, lyrics, dance, orchestration, staging, costume design, lighting design, scenic design, props design, theater technology, and much, much more. It's an industry with ripple effects that go far beyond the footlights of Broadway. It's inspiring exhibitions and programs at libraries, museums, and historical sites across the country. It's also inspired generations, from elementary school students to lifelong learners, to learn about American history, to go beyond what our textbooks told us, to read primary sources, to listen, to learn, and to examine. It's a financial blockbuster that, before the current pandemic, played to packed houses in New York City and London, with 4 national touring companies performing at art centers across the United States, and it's surely breaking streaming records right now on Disney+. It's a conversation sparking artwork permeated with social commentary on the foundation of the nation and how the process of democracy was just as fraught then as it is now. And finally, Perhaps the greatest impact of all, it challenges us to think differently about history and legacy on both a personal level and as Americans, and to ask who lives, who dies, who tells your story.
Please welcome Lin-Manuel Miranda.
During Hamilton's first year, Miranda, who is the composer, librettist, and performer, appeared in countless print and digital publications and was interviewed by major radio and television news programs. He was everywhere and often in places you're more likely to see the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or a blockbuster movie star. How many Broadway artists end up on the cover of Rolling Stone, Time Magazine, Smithsonian Magazine, and GQ in the same year? Couple this widespread exposure with the concurrent growth of social media platforms, in particular Twitter, and its creators collectively leveraging their personal accounts, and Hamilton quickly surpassed the reach of any prior theatrical production, play or musical. Children dressed as historical figures or characters from the show for Halloween, and my then 89-year-old grandmother, who lives on the home farm in Monticello, Wisconsin, asked me on a visit if I knew anything about this Lin-Manuel Miranda guy. Part of Miranda's genius is that he's an astute business person and is a better public relations spokesperson and marketer than most who hold those titles at Fortune 500 companies. As a storyteller, he knows how to reach an audience and how to engage with and build his fan base. On May 12, 2009, Miranda was invited to perform music from In the Heights at the White House Evening of Poetry, Music, and Spoken Word, the first ever such event and one that was conceived by and hosted by President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama. Instead of performing a song from In the Heights, he performed the first song from the Hamilton mixtape, an early version of what would later become Alexander Hamilton, the opening number to the musical.
My God. I'm thrilled the White House called me tonight because I'm actually working on a hip. St. Croix, of illegitimate birth, became George Washington's right-hand man, became Treasury Secretary, caught beef with every other founding father, and all on the strength of his writing. I think he embodies the word's ability to make a difference. So I'm going to be doing the first song from that tonight.
It's a brilliant move. At the time, it's the only song he'd written. But here, on a national stage, he's taking risk of proof of concept, knowing if he's successful, it would build interest in his newest project. Over the 6 years that Hamilton evolved from a song cycle or album and into the complex, beautiful theatrical production blockbuster that is Hamilton, an American Musical, Lin shared every moment of the process with his fans via his prolific Twitter account. Whether agonizing over a lyric, sharing his excitement of working on a new moment in the show with the director or a co-designer, or waking up in the middle of the night with a new idea. He invited everyone into the process, into his dream project, which became our dream project. And in doing so, he built momentum and interest, which led to funding and a guaranteed audience for, at the very least, the eventual off-Broadway production. Beyond that, he has this uncanny ability to remain earnest and genuine in every interview and to make you as the listener feel like everything he says is the first time he's had that thought or spoken. In reality, while he is genuinely excited to share everything he can about Hamilton and his work with as broad of an audience as possible, he's also very shrewd and he sticks to talking points that resonate. Hamilton is a story of America then told by America now. You've probably heard that many times, and it is a great description of the work. He also shares how he recognized parallels between the story of Alexander Hamilton and his father's story of immigrating from Puerto Rico to New York City, of learning English and attending law school, and becoming a civic leader in the community. His interviews are a masterclass for nonprofit leaders, chancellors at universities, and social entrepreneurs on how to talk about your mission-driven work in a compelling way. The success of Hamilton, the Grammy Award-winning cast recording, the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, the Tony Awards, and being embraced by contemporary popular culture and multiple generations is lightning in a bottle, a phenomenon we may never see again. Many attribute the success of Hamilton to one man, to Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote the book, the music, and lyrics. But Lin himself always credits the cabinet. Part of Miranda's genius is his ability to bring together a creative team that is greater than the sum of its parts. that is comprised of similarly gifted individuals who are well-versed in a vast array of musical, theatrical, and dance styles. Like Alexander Hamilton with John Lorenz, Lafayette, and Hercules Mulligan, Lin-Manuel Miranda has close aides and allies who are an integral part of the person he is and the work that he does. His band of brothers includes director Thomas Kail, music director and orchestrator Alex Lacamoire, and choreographer Andy Blankenbuehler. Nicknamed the Cabinet, the quartet first collaborated on In the Heights, which was nominated for 13 Tony Awards, including Best Direction, in 2008, and won 4 Best Musical, Best Original Score, Best Choreography, and Best Orchestrations. On a side note, Howell Binkley was nominated for Best Lighting Design for In the Heights and went on to also light Hamilton. It was Lacamoire and Kail who convinced Miranda that the Hamilton mixtape was much bigger than his original intent for the project, an album about the life and times of Alexander Hamilton, and to think of it as a fully staged musical theater production. Kail shared, "The one thing I find really useful with this particular group is just planting some flags on the horizon so we can march toward them. And Lin responds very well to that. Once the flow state begins with him, it's really just about maintaining it. Once it really opens up, as it started to in 2012 and 2013, it was such a constant production from him. It was about harnessing it then, as well as focusing on targets for all of us to hit." In the creative process, often the orchestrator joins in near the end, when the score is completely finished, it's been written out with a piano part and vocal lines, but that's not the case with Miranda and Alex Lacamoire. Lin is really open to suggestions, Lacamoire says, adding that sometimes Miranda would just bring in a chord sheet to work from, other times a fully formed demo. When he brings in a piece of music, he really gives me the freedom to explore stuff. He really allows me to put my stamp on it. I get to play and suggest. In an interview, Andy Blankenbuehler, the choreographer, said he helped himself generously to the work of Justin Timberlake and Paula Abdul, as well as borrowed from Broadway and Hollywood greats like Bob Fosse, Jerome Robbins, Fred Astaire, and Jack Cole. Sharing this wide-ranging vocabulary of sounds, lyrics, poetry, and movement, and a deep curiosity in bringing together seemingly opposing genres, is the spark that made Hamilton possible and has sustained it over 6 years from idea to opening night off Broadway at the Public Theater. The friendship and the professional integrity within the cabinet provided the trust and creative energy that Miranda needed to write the book and music for the show and get the financial backing needed to make it possible. And in December 2018, the Kennedy Center Honor Awards recognized the entire core creative team, the members of the cabinet, with a special award for being, quote, trailblazing creators of a transformative work that defies category, end quote. When I first saw Hamilton, I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't a fan of hip hop music or dance. I hadn't seen In the Heights. But my close friend's aunt was a subscriber at the Public Theater, and she gave us tickets to the February 8th, 2015 performance. The off-Broadway show ran in the Newman Theater in the Public Theater complex. It's this incredible space with a full broad-sized proscenium stage, but only 299 seats in the audience. So think about that. Only 299 people were able to attend each performance. Well, it takes nearly 100 people just to run the show. There are 21 cast members on stage. Backstage, we have actor swings on standby, wardrobe and run crew. We've got light board operators, turntable operators, stage managers calling the show and taking care of the cast. And then in the front of the house, where the audience sees people, we've got the house manager, the ushers, the box office, merchandise, and concession workers. It was magical, to say the least, to be one of only 299 people in the audience. At the time, there were only a few production photos and there wasn't any video available. The opening number, Alexander Hamilton, literally blew me away. It was like the first time I saw the 1961 film of West Side Story, a complex, fully artistically integrated story where no one element was more important than the other. The music, the choreography, and the staging were integrated seamlessly, and the lighting, costumes, and scenic elements fully supported the story being told. The parallels between West Side Story and Hamilton are plentiful, as the creators of Hamilton are steeped in musical theater, both as fans of the genre and in their own high school and college experiences. West Side Story was also co-created by an incredibly strong collaborative team. Leonard Bernstein with music, Arthur Lawrence, the book or script, Jerome Robbins choreography, and Stephen Sondheim with the lyrics. It was a game changer in the genre, as it fully integrated all of those elements in the way that the story was told. It was about New York City then, about the conflicts between immigrant groups, Polish and Puerto Rican, and the fight for power and identity and legacy. I could go on, but that's another lecture for another time. As the opening number concluded, I was also struck by the fact that Alexander Hamilton was much like the prologue of West Side Story, which is, in effect, the prologue of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, one of the greatest poets and playwrights ever to have walked the earth or written on a page. Shakespeare's plays, hip-hop lyrics, and Hamilton were all written as spoken word to be experienced through performance first, through speaking and vocalization, and not as something that's read from a printed page. Oddly enough, most high school students first encounter Shakespeare by being required to read a play in English class, even though audiences during his lifetime are much more likely to see a performance on stage, to hear the words, and to share a communal theatrical experience than to ever have the opportunity to own or read a copy of a script. Oscar Eustis, the artistic director of New York City's Public Theater, the organization that produced the final year of workshops and the off-Broadway production of the show, explained how, like Shakespeare, Miranda took the language of the people and elevated it to art. Quote, in Shakespeare's case, he elevated it to an iambic pentameter. In Lin-Manuel's case, he elevated it to hip hop and rap, and he ennobled it by turning it into verse and by putting it at the center of the stage. That's exactly what Shakespeare was doing. Shakespeare, like Miranda, was a champion of successful storytelling through verse, and the comparisons don't stop there. Shakespeare's history plays and great tragedies like Hamlet and Macbeth are adaptations of Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland, a comprehensive history, quote unquote, of Britain that was originally published in 1577 and revised in 1587. Shakespeare took those stories that had been printed and shared and read by many and adapted them for theatrical stage. Much like both Shakespeare and Miranda, the genius is not in the stories that are being told. They're not necessarily original. The genius is in how they tell them. And in Lin's case, the genius is that he's bringing together so many disparate sources, the book by Chernow, his love of the music of his youth, 1990s hip hop, and his love of listening to, performing in, and writing musical theater. Finally, one of the greatest similarities in the genius of William Shakespeare and of Lin-Manuel Miranda is the ability to address the history of a nation through the eyes of a central individual's experience. To see drama in the epic sweep of history and the violence of war and the battle for power, and in the most human emotions and experiences. From the most important personal flight and plight, the struggle of love and dying, the world hanging in the balance. To paraphrase Sarah Churchwell, Hamilton fuses American history with current politics, using a soundtrack of American popular music and one of the most inventive librettos ever written. The result is that nearly every song on the show works as a complex historical concert, layering musical past with the musical present, just as the historical past mingles with the political present. An underdog story in the spirit of Horatio Alger, both Ron Chernow's book and the musical Hamilton tap into the American ethos of the rags to riches American dream, which is also very much the underground narrative of hip hop. A traditional musical in structure, form, and construction, Hamilton is also infused with hip hop elements. Broadway dance and ballet meet hip hop movement. A live orchestra with strings and keyboards and percussion plays along with recorded drum tracks and sound effects and musical samples. Carolyn Benton Cockefair would surely have appreciated and most likely integrated into the courses that she taught. Ben Brantley wrote in the New York Times that Hamilton is, among other things, about who owns history, who gets to be in charge of the narrative. The financial success of Hamilton has significantly impacted the kind of work that producers are willing to invest in and has significantly impacted casting on Broadway. Yes, we are starting to see more diversity on stage and in the offerings that were produced, but Hamilton has accelerated that shift greatly. The Public Theater, which workshopped and produced the off-Broadway production, is now on stable ground for decades to come and is using the royalties it's earning from the investment to support the development of new works. The more popular Hamilton is, the more royalties they earn, the more new plays and new composers and new works get funded. The public doesn't just give creators money when the show is done. It provides financial support through commissions that enable artists and composers and playwrights to focus their energies on bringing new stories to the stage. Beyond that, seeing more actors, composers, and artists of color succeed in the field reminds us of the actual overall demographics of our country. And Seeing yourself on stage as a president, as a founding father, as the woman who founded the first public orphanage in the country can, as a young person, as an audience member, as an artist, have an immeasurable impact. Representation matters. While theater audiences may not yet be as diverse as the overall population of the country, the success of a show like Hamilton encourages us all to try something we're unfamiliar with, whether it's hip hop or it's musical theater. Since Hamilton opened off Broadway in 2015, research for Broadway and touring productions has shown a 130% increase in attendees ages 18 to 44. Also, the average age of subscribers has fallen by over 4 years. While according to Broadway League, about 80% of Broadway ticket buyers are white, the percentages of Black, Hispanic, and Asian theatergoers have all risen significantly in the past decade and accelerated since Hamilton debuted on Broadway. Hamilton has also been groundbreaking with their EduHam program, making tens of thousands of tickets available to schools for the low price of $10 each, and partnering with the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History to create an integrated educational curriculum for schools and families. As the stories that are told and the artists telling them continue to more accurately reflect the makeup of our country, this number of audience members is sure to grow. In closing, Hamilton, an American musical, is truly a work of genius and an American remix. Combines musical theater, an American art form rooted in Western classical music, with hip hop, an American genre of music and culture that grew out of the expressive forms of African American and Caribbean immigrant artists in the Bronx in the 1980s. It's also both the story of the founding of the country and the revolution, and a vivid commentary on contemporary issues in America today. It both builds on the past and looks to the future. The opening number of the show features the entire cast in parchment-colored costumes, blank sheets of papers, their stories untold, their character not yet revealed. Will they matter? Will their stories be told? The hip-hop underdog story of Alexander Hamilton celebrates the idea of the land of opportunity while shining a spotlight on our history, on our society then and now. Hamilton challenges us to ask, what stories have been told and celebrated? What stories and experiences have been left out? Who has opportunity in our country? Who has the power to make the decisions that affect the allocation of resources in communities? Clean drinking water, quality educational systems, public transportation, healthcare for all, quality of life. Lin and his creative team worked collaboratively to make great art that not only tells the story of the founding of our country, but as a piece of social activism and commentary, also imagines a future where America and the diversity of its people are reflected not only on the stages of Broadway, but also in the cabinet of the White House and the seats of Congress. Perhaps the greatest impacts of Hamilton are the reflection, the questions, and the conversations that it has inspired. What does it mean to be an American? What stories are told and who tells them? And to quote the closing lines of the musical, who lives, who dies, who tells your story? Thank you.
Thanks so much. What a wonderful presentation. I'm delighted to welcome virtually with us Sarah Marty. Thanks so much for joining us from Wisconsin on this afternoon. Lovely weather here in Kansas City today, so hopefully it's good for you as well in Wisconsin.
Oh, the same here in Madison, where it's almost like fall in the middle of August, so we're having a beautiful day. And thank you so much, Dr. Everett, for hosting the Q&A and for the lovely introduction. And I also want to make sure to thank Ann Miller and Pam Hosel for the invitation from the committee, and give a quick shout out to Sophie McCluskey, Terrence Berger, and Thomas Bogart for all their work in putting together today's event. So with that, I see questions already coming in, so.
Yes, and one from Elizabeth Darr in downtown Kansas City. The Obamas were there at the beginning. Have they ever seen Hamilton in performance?
They did, actually. They saw Hamilton on Broadway. They did a date night and had a chance to see it with the original Broadway cast at the Richard Rodgers Theater. And they did invite the entire cast of Hamilton to come and perform a number of the pieces from the show at the White House in the spring before the Tony Awards. So that original Broadway cast got a chance to go to the White House, spend some time with the Obamas, take a tour, have a ton of conversations, and then also did a program as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And from Paul Laird in Lawrence, Kansas. Paul writes, hip hop is an important part of the show's score, but there are other styles involved as well. Do you think this broadens the show's appeal?
What a great question, Paul. When I first heard about Hamilton, they were calling it a hip hop musical. And I think they kind of made that choice in a way because it's bringing together those two primary genres, hip hop and musical theater, but also that it was kind of edgy in a way, right? But when I listened to Hamilton as a musical theater nerd, to me, first and foremost, it's a musical, but it has elements of hip hop that come in, but it also has all of these other kinds of styles of music and of dance that come in because of the broad background of the creators. You know, when we, that quote that I shared from Andy Blankenbuehler and how he studied the history of dance going back to Bojangles Robinson and Fred Astaire and coming up through Gene Kelly into the choreography of Jerome Robbins and Bob Fosse, all those styles along with hip hop and contemporary dance. You see the same thing with music, that they're really bringing together over a century or even longer, which Dr. Everett could actually talk about as well, of musical and theatrical and dance styles. So it's one of the reasons that I think it's such a unique and interesting piece to study and to watch.
Great. And Abigail Keene asks, given your ongoing exploration and study of all things Hamilton, what's your most recent discovery? Anything from seeing the Disney Plus stream? This is from Abby Keene near Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Well, hello, Abby. I'm so glad to see you. Abby is actually a theater teacher here in Wisconsin and a fantastic one at that. So I really have welcomed the opportunity to see the film. Of course, the film is different than being there in the audience in a live performance, but the great joy of having it in a place that you can go back and rewatch and re-see and really hone in on a particular aspect or moment in the show is you see things that you'll just miss when it's flying by you. I've heard the pace of Hamilton described as relentless. Both Hamilton, the character, and Hamilton, the musical. It just flies. I don't remember the exact statistic, but it has the most words per minute than any other operetta or musical ever written. And you can't take it in. There's so much stimulation with the lighting and the costumes and the dancing and the set pieces whirling around that the movie has been just a great chance to sit down and just watch a moment. So I would recommend for everybody at home to spend some time watching the Winter's Ball scene, which is what is when the young men arrive at the party, and it is the song Helpless, and then rewind into Satisfaction. What's brilliant about that particular moment in the show is that you're seeing a scene from two very different perspectives, which in a way is a really interesting sort of meta commentary on what is history and how history is different for each one of us. You know, anybody who's ever told a story at a family gathering and you tell the story and your brother says, that's not what happened, this is what happened. You both were there. You both had the same experience, quote unquote, but you have different versions of the story. And I feel like Helpless and Satisfaction is this interesting way to see that play out. And it's beautifully staged and directed and danced. So you really need to spend time looking at that to see what's happening with the ensemble in the background. So that'd be my recommendation of a fun thing to do if you have Disney Plus and can watch the film.
Great. And Jean Traylor asks, please address the underlit state of the stage. And does this reflect Hamilton's ending or something else?
Hi, Jean. I'm not quite sure if I'll try to answer that question. I hope I'm getting to what you're getting to. One of the things that happens with film is you light a production differently if you're lighting it for a live stage performance versus lighting a movie per se. And while it's absolutely magical that the Disney film that they did in 2016 with the original Broadway cast was the film of a live performance, it does translate a little bit differently optically for your eye than it would if they were filming a movie. So it isn't actually underlit when you're there in real life seeing a stage performance. It's just the nature of trying to capture a stage production on film for streaming. So hopefully that did that make sense?
Great. And we have Kennedy Steyer, Michaela Hammond, and Sophia Schwartz are asking,
Okay.
what are the main sources Lin-Manuel Miranda used for research to ensure the historical accuracy of Hamilton?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Thank you so much for being here. There's a fantastic lecture from AP US History that just came out May 2020. You can find it on YouTube, where Lin talks a lot about the primary sources that he used to create the show. So the first primary source is the 700-pound and 700-page Ron Chernow book, right? And Ron Chernow's book is a particular take on all of the primary sources and books that he read, right? So this is the primary source. But Lin also spent time in archives looking at letters and journals and ledgers and all sorts of primary source documents that are available in the New York Public Library and many of their branches, and other museums and libraries that were open to him in New York City as well. So he had many, many sources available. And if you happen to be in Wisconsin, we have a fantastic North American history collection at the Wisconsin Historical Society where you can actually go, and if you write ahead of time to a librarian, they will pull many of those items out and you can have a chance to turn the pages of the Reynolds pamphlet or look at a battle map or any of a number of documents or items from that time period. And you may have a similar archive in your hometown, so it's always good to reach out to your librarians and see what they have. You never know what secrets are hidden in the stacks.
That's true, and thank you on behalf of another person who uses a lot of archives, and I know archivists is thrilled. Yes, we had these local resources all around. There's a question here as well on the idea, how important was the original cast to the success of this musical?
Oh my gosh, that's a wonderful question. Hugely important, hugely important. And part of that is because of the development process of bringing a new work to the stage. So when you're a writer, you may sit by yourself and put a bunch of things on the page, and then you may invite a couple of your collaborators or friends to try it out, and maybe we'll try a reading, or can you sing the song and I'll play it, and we'll see sort of what that's like. But there's a point where you can only get so far until you were working with professional actors. And the way that they're able to embody a character and bring so much more to those words than you could ever do on your own, especially in a show with this many different characters and parts. And in the development process of a show like Hamilton, within this 6-year process, about 3 years of it involved many cast members. And in terms of the original Broadway cast, most of them were involved the last year. So you can imagine in a rehearsal space, you see an actor or you hear an actor do something a particular way. You get to know them as a person. And that personality and the strengths that they have as performers begin to infuse themselves into the development of those characters. So we see things like Lafayette rapping ridiculously quickly in Act 1 because Daveed Diggs is able to spit rhymes like that, right? We begin to see parts of Renee Elise Goldsberry's personality infuse the way that Angelica has developed over the course of the show. So those original cast members were so important to how the show developed and to how those characters developed as well.
And speaking of some of these specific performers, there's actually 2 questions that come very similar. What is your perspective on the gasp that Hamilton's wife, Eliza, utters at the end? And one person,
I have had so many arguments about this. Oh my goodness. We could probably argue about it right now. I think to me, it's really simple. To me, the last person so the whole epilogue of the show is Eliza telling her story. And the last person she sees, she's talking about, I'm coming, my love, to Hamilton. She touches his hand. She walks down stage. She looks up. And to me, it's her dying and seeing the light and being reunited with her family. So that's my interpretation. I'm sure there are other opinions out there, but that's what I think happens. It's her last breath.
And we have 2 questions that are fairly similar, addressing some of the same topics. So I'll read these back to back. First from Michaela Sullivan Fowler, public historian at UW-Madison. Hi, Sarah. What might you illuminate on the current deliberation regarding the Black Lives Matter conversations about Hamilton's complicity regarding the place of slavery in his background? And then from Saya Jenks, I hope I'm The question, now that the country is reckoning with the legacies of many of our founding fathers as slaveholders, do you think popular reception to Hamilton will change? Will we find it problematic that Black and brown actors are glorifying the legacies of these men without addressing the fact that founding fathers like Washington and Jefferson enslaved humans?
Okay, thank you both for your questions. I would share that Hamilton is a complicated piece, and that that's the purpose of art, is to create conversations and create a space for those conversations, both by those who are making the art and those who are appreciating the art. So the first thing that I would want to address is that Hamilton is not history. Hamilton is a piece of historical fiction, and the power of Hamilton is the casting choice and the decision to cast people of color as the founding fathers, because people of color stories were not told and have not been told, and they have not been included in history. Their stories have not been captured and have not been put on stages before. So when we think of Hamilton as America today, telling us a version of America then, the power of the show is in that choice of the casting and the choice of an African-American man, much like Barack Obama is our first person of color, is the first Black president, to have an African-American man playing George Washington, to have brown and Black actors playing these founding fathers and reclaiming that history that they've been written out of, is a really powerful cultural impact of the show, and the opportunities that has created across the theater world and just across the world. When we look at who's running for office and how that has changed since Hamilton hit Broadway stages in 2015, the statistics are phenomenal to look at the number of people of color and the number of women who are running for office now in comparison to pre-Hamilton coming on Broadway. It's a huge cultural impact. I wanted to share a quote about whether or not Lin-Manuel Miranda addressed slavery in Hamilton. Yes, 100%. It is not central to the story. Ava DuVernay, the creator, fabulous filmmaker and creator and director of 13th Amendment, said slavery is not central for sure, but he didn't deny or ignore it. He made choices about it. I greatly enjoyed the work and was wildly curious after watching. I wouldn't have studied any of those founders like I did if it wasn't for Hamilton. She went on to say, I know the history of America. I don't believe what I don't believe what I see on stage. I know that the founding fathers, most of them from the North and the South, were involved in slavery and the slave trade. And hopefully when students get interested in this story, they are able to make the difference between a character in a musical and the real history, and that they're inspired to learn that real history and engage in those conversations of why am I not part of that history? Or why have entire swaths of people been cut out of that history?
And then sort of following on this,
Yeah.
Kate Black is asking, as licensure becomes available to community theaters and so forth, what are the implications of casting in areas where there are few BIPOC, Blacks, Indigenous, and people of color?
That's a great question. I have not heard Lynn talk about that. I know in the case of In the Heights, rightly so, it is very, very specific that you will cast people of color and people of Latinx heritage as Latinx characters in the Heights. Initially, they had released a different version of the show for high schools to perform, but I really do believe with Hamilton, it will be a very nuanced and complicated conversation, and I don't think there will be a version of Hamilton that comes out where people of color are not playing those roles, because that's the whole point in the storytelling, is who is left out, and who do we not see in the halls of Congress, and who do we not see in the White House, and who do we not see in positions of power, and what happens with that. You know, we think about the founding fathers as being so long ago, but that 200 plus years ago, those decisions they made in those rooms are still having huge ramifications today. So it's really important that we're able to have a good census, to have the census reflect who actually lives in the country, that we get out the vote, and that we're able to support a wide array of people coming into office, and that it's not only open to those who have the money and the privilege to do so.
And Ann Vanderblumen asks, have you ever met Lin?
Oh, I have. I wish I could show you my computer right now. I am friends with Karen Olivo and Jim Uphoff. Karen is a well-known Broadway actor and a good friend of Lin's. And when they were married, they had a backyard reception, and Lin, believe it or not, was the wedding DJ for the dance party in the backyard. So he had his laptop that, if you've seen the PBS documentary, I have the same laptop with the little typewriter screen on the back, and I swear I've had it since for at least 5 years. But yes, I met him. We talked about Hamilton. It was a little bit surreal, and that was the fall before it opened off Broadway. It was only a couple of months before he was at the Public Theater. He is every bit as genuine and brilliant and amazing in person as he is in interviews.
And then a question coming again, thinking about this life of Hamilton that is continuing. Actually, two questions. What do you think will happen to this once Broadway reopens? Will this show be setting records? And then likewise, thinking about touring productions, here's a technical question for you.
Sure.
How difficult has it been to incorporate the moving circular platforms into regional theaters? And what do you see as happening with this choreography as more and more, as the musical is going to be performed in more and more different venues?
So the way that, Broadway tours there's a couple of companies that run all of the Broadway tours, and those tours route through the same cities. And the companies that run those tours, they know what the theaters are in those various cities. They know, if we were to average them together, what is the stage size that we need? How big of an upstage space do we need? All those things. And they know if a theater can hold a particular show. So Hamilton is of a size that only some venues can actually welcome that show to their performing arts center, right? If a venue could take Lion King or Les Mis, then it can definitely hold Hamilton the musical. And that's part of that particular industry. And when it was designed to go on tour, they wanted to make sure to have a version of the set that is portable enough that it can be taken down and put together many, many times, and that it will fit in the vast majority of tier 1 and tier 2 city venues as they're going around. One of the things that's kind of interesting to learn about the set is the entire turntable is made from 3x6 squares that are all about, the whole floor is about 6 inches tall. So they bring their own deck or their own floor that has a turntable, and they lock together kind of like Legos. And as you start in the middle and you're locking those pieces together, you're also hooking together power cables, because the turntable is automated and engineered to be run by a console that's off stage at the same time. So it's pretty amazing technology. If you get a chance to look up the Ham for Ham, there's a Ham for Ham with the turntable where you can watch it from up above. So
that's wonderful. This has been so amazing.
Oh my gosh, there's so many questions we didn't get to answer. I'm so sorry.
So much, but unfortunately our time is nearly up. So I wanted to thank you, Sarah, for a fascinating presentation, and also for this very engaging and enlightening discussion. Thank you so much for this. And I'm going to turn things back over to Pam Hosel.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. It's been such a treat to meet you, and I really appreciate your questions.
Thank you. Sorry for the glitch there. Sarah, thank you. It was fantastic. And if you were in person with us in the past, you would hear a loud applause for this wonderful presentation and just expanding on our knowledge of this groundbreaking musical. Thank you very much on behalf of Cockefair. And I want to say to our audience, before we close, I want to say to you, stay healthy and take care. And we'll invite you to attend our next virtual presentation in November. It's been a pleasure to have you join us tonight, and we'll see you again. Thank you.